I love the way you positioned the framing of this and saying that, we're at this stage where I think people are going to actually start to use it after we've been working on this for over a decade. And um, I think that's right. I think this is a special opportunity. And whenever we have these cycles where we're at the kind of heading towards a bull cycle and people get all excited about crypto, they want to learn. It's really nice to be in a position in this cycle to say, look, we have this exciting functionality now that you'll be able to use.
This podcast is sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you could find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. Hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of speaking with the one and only Paul Brigner of the Electric Coin Company. How's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, no problem. And it's kind of funny because we kind of spoke last year a little bit after when the whole Brave announcement thing happened. And I was trying, last year I did a 12 episode, 12 month Zcash podcast, and I was trying to do it for that. But it's kind of funny since that is concluded this year, this will be the second Zcash related podcast on my channel anyway. So it's not, it's not exactly like I'm some sort of a paid shill or anything. It's very, the news and the interest is still there, and I'm still very excited to hear
Thank
more.
you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And of course, thank you for the work you did last year with all of those episodes. Thanks for having us on this year. You've been in this ecosystem for a very, very long time, and your interest and support is really appreciated.
Well, thank you. And why don't we just start off with a quick intro to yourself? Like, who are you? How'd you get into crypto, and how did that lead you to the Zcash ecosystem?
Sure. Okay. So again, I'm Paul Brigner. I'm currently the Vice President of Strategic Alliances at Electric Coin Company. Electric Coin Company founded Zcash way back in 2016, and long story since then. We can talk a little bit about the history of Electric Coin Company. But going back to my personal history, I actually started out my career way back in the early days of the internet as a software developer. I did that for 10 years, had some really interesting experience. Some of it was actually in the finance related industry, in the energy industry, actually, going back to the early days of Enron, where that was kind of like where I started my career. And that was a great start because I was like writing some of the very first internet-based software back then, providing real-time natural gas prices on the internet when you did that via Java applets. So that was a great way to start my career. But after about 10 years, and this is after the dot-com bust, I was thinking about my future, thinking about ways to make my career more enriching. And about this time, policy issues were really important for the early internet. And I think like Lawrence Lessig had written the book about code as law, and there were other things that people probably remember happening at that time, big Microsoft lawsuits, of course. And I just thought that law seemed really interesting. So I went to law school in the evening. At this time, I was already in Washington, D.C., working at Verizon. And I transitioned almost immediately into their public policy and regulatory area, where I was working to communicate with a vast array of stakeholders, trying to help them understand what Verizon was doing. So it like transitioned my career from a very technical software development orientation to policy. And now I've been doing that, since, it's been many years, 15 years now, I think, since I've been working in the policy and regulatory arena. But working in a place like Verizon, it was a really special experience because they are very sophisticated in their policy and lobbying organization. Great way to understand how things get done in Washington, D.C. Was there for a number of years, was then recruited to take on a pretty special job at the Motion Picture Association of America because I had developed some strong relationships with internet ecosystem organizations, and they needed help to develop some of those relationships. Turns out that they really that's kind of a complicated story, but they were really set on pushing forward a piece of legislation called PIPA and SOPA, and that was not popular, as all the listeners of your podcast probably know. I was trying to help them like develop relationships that would make it better and make it more internet friendly, and that just crashed and burned really bad, historically bad. So it was nice to move on from there to a place that is definitely internet friendly, and that was the Internet Society. There for a number of years, working to help them promote good internet policy, and a few years later, started to become familiar with cryptocurrency through work at Georgetown University. It's a very long story. I've had a long career, but I've been at some really interesting places and had some special experiences. So I think around 2017, I worked for the Chamber of Digital Commerce, which is a trade association for cryptocurrency, and that was my start. That's really how I got into it, and I've been heavy into it ever since. Sorry about the long story.
No, that's great. It's great to
a
hear
long path.
like origin stories like that, and I do. There's a little bit of crossover because I used to be in the public policy scene in DC back in like the '08 era, so long time ago as well, and it's kind of interesting to see what gets people kind of in the same basic vein. Yeah, so how did that get to Zcash in particular and jumping on board with ECC?
When I was at the Chamber of Digital Commerce, part of my job was speaking to different projects that we felt should be members, and actually helping to develop some proposals for these projects that would entice them to join and become part of the trade association. And I remember during that time, I was writing up some things that I thought that the chamber should be doing that would be appealing to Electric Coin Company and to the Zcash ecosystem. And I think I wasn't personally doing that communication. It was my boss and others at the organization at the time that were talking to Electric Coin Company. That didn't happen, but that's how I got familiar with the project. I really loved the ethos of the project. I loved how pure it is actually to be focused on privacy and digital payments. Still, that's what keeps me in this ecosystem. I love it so much that it's a very special project in that regard. So after I had left the chamber and was doing some other things, again back with Georgetown University, I started to focus on the project and focus on Electric Coin Company, and was able to find a place where I could contribute through public policy work.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's definitely something that I appreciate in my own life, where I've had very few like real jobs as far as you know jobs that aren't mission driven in some way, and I've worked
Yeah,
harder than anyone else in the world in some ways for less pay, longer hours and stuff, but just because it's not
that's
work,
right.
it's a calling, and so I understand very well how that whole thing works. It's so we get to ECC, right, and Zcash ecosystem, and so uh, I guess the reason why I initially hit you up to talk with you was about this whole Brave partnership type thing, and
Hmm.
Zcash or ECC announced a partnership with Brave browser to integrate with Brave, and I'm a I'm a longtime user of Brave. Basically, almost as soon as it came out, I switched, and I've also been a partner with Brave for a few advertising campaigns and things like that as well. And so
Hmm.
I don't have anything bad to say about Brave is my point. And so when I saw this, I got
Yeah,
excited because I'm like, oh, this is one of my favorite projects is Zcash. One of my favorite other projects is Brave slash the browser, and I also am a very frequent user of encrypted messaging, and I really like the idea of private cryptocurrency payments and things like that associated with all that. So like all this stuff, it just seemed like a coalescence of almost everything I'm really interested in. So would you mind just
Great,
quickly
great.
giving like a rundown of what this partnership is and as far as you're aware how it came to be?
Sure. I wasn't involved in the earliest stages of this partnership. In fact, it goes back quite a while, and it's not just between Electric Coin Company and Brave. The
Mm-hmm.
core partner here is the Filecoin Foundation. And in fact, my boss at the time was Josh Swihart, who was like spearheaded this partnership, and I think he worked on it for well over a year before the partnership was really firmed up and implemented. Before we came to this conclusion where we would do something with Brave between the three organizations. So I have to give credit where it's due to Josh. And by the way, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, at least those who are focused on the Zcash ecosystem, Josh Swihart is now the CEO of Electric Coin Company. He took over earlier this year from our founder, Zuko Wilcox. So,
Mm-hmm.
where I have step in now is since the beginning of the year, I also took on more responsibility for strategic alliances. So I'm now kind of like point person to, at least on the alliances front, to be working with partners like Brave and Filecoin to make sure that we have good relationships there and that we're evolving the relationships to add value to Zcash users. I think that the earliest of this relationship goes back to a grant program that was set up between Electric Coin Company and the Filecoin Foundation. The grant was for intellectual property rights that the Filecoin Foundation had from Electric Coin Company. So they put this money aside, and that is the funding mechanism for Brave to write this software. It's really exciting right now because, as you note, like this is about to happen. I think Brave is about to release transparent support for Zcash in the digital wallet built into the Brave browser. And then shortly thereafter, they will provide shielded support for Zcash. And it really is a game changer. I think to be able to have that in the Brave browser, as you note, a lot of people trust Brave. I use Brave. I've used it for the longest time. And to have all of that come together, these things that we deeply care about with privacy and cryptocurrency and Brave, and then in the future, adding functionality with Filecoin as well. It's a really great combination, very powerful. So this is the kind of strategic alliance that I hope to be able to forge and nurture in this new role.
Yeah, it's so the for those who don't know, Brave does have a wallet in the browser to facilitate a lot of those kind of Web3 functions. And so, if I'm understanding correctly, that means Zcash is going to be added for transparent support in the wallet pretty soon. And then after that will be shielded. And this is purely as like a monetary transfer kind of a functionality, right?
Yeah, well, and also I think that there's I don't want to get ahead of anything, but
Mm.
we're hoping that there will be potentially on and off capability, like being able to purchase Zcash directly through that interface as well. And I think that that's possible through other cryptocurrencies already in the Brave wallet. So that's an important function that we hope to be able to get in there. Yeah. So in fact, for those who want to get in now, you can actually download the nightly beta release of Brave, and you can start to use it right away. It's there. So yeah,
Nice.
I think it's coming very very soon. Transparent support to a like formally released the actual production release of Brave in the very near future.
Yeah, and so that's the wallet with shielded, transparent, and then we got on and off ramps potentially. Now, what really piqued my interest, of course, was the encrypted messenger talk and saying something about using Zcash shielded messages or something like that. There's some talk, and obviously there's the final products don't always necessarily resemble initial speculation maybe, but what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I can say that it is an area that we're actively researching. There has been work done like to spec this out already in the past. So it's not something that it's not a brand new idea, but it's something that now that Electric Coin Company is really focused on providing functionality that users want and need. It's something that is getting a much higher priority in our roadmap. And speaking of roadmap, Josh Swihart published on the Zcash forum a roadmap that people can reference, and you'll see that it's on the near the top of the list, or on the very short list of functions that we hope to be able to build in to the new Zashi, that's Zashi, Zashi wallet that ECC has been developing. That's also big news, is that the Zashi wallet, the official Zcash wallet, will be available this month, later this month on iOS, and then next month on Android. So a pretty huge development, actually. You know well that to use Zcash in the past, you've had to use third-party wallets. You could have used the command line Zcash D if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Hardcore people did that, but it's nice to have a wallet you trust, that comes from an official source like Electric Coin Company, where the core protocol developers and have been for a long time. So, this is a big deal that, this is really, I think, part of the bigger transition that occurred with Zuko basically passing the reins to Josh to focus us on user functionality and things that will drive adoption for Zcash. Zcash has a really interesting background. It's got its roots, as you know again well, it's got its roots in academia. It came from this research that on zero knowledge proofs, nobody had really implemented it on a wide scale. We were the very first. So it took a long time, I think, for us just to work out the science and to work out the kinks. And some who know Zcash well will know that there was a period in the last couple of years where we had some dusting attacks that kind of bogged down the network. We worked past that. So we've worked through a lot of the core protocol issues, and we're going on 10 years now. I think now is a great time to be focusing on user functionality and user adoption in a way that we really haven't before. So this is kind of a pivotal time, I'd say, in the Zcash ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I remember when a lot of this talk around Zashi started, and I am in the Discord where I see all the updates and testing of Zashi, and I've been the whole time.
Yeah.
I do remember when there's that decision for ECC to focus on a wallet. I remember about 2/3, at least, of the people I talked to seemed to think that that was not a good idea in the slightest. And around a third, or maybe even fewer, thought, "Oh, I think that this is good." I did remain kind of undecided, but leaned in the favor of this is a good idea because even though these are decentralized projects and decentralized ecosystems and kind of like a natural resource that anyone can use, the minimum viable expectation of functionality, I think, is an important thing to have handled. Yeah. And for Zcash's experience in particular, I mean, I'm a longtime Zcash user. I was there when someone made the first, I believe, Sprout shielded transaction for an actual purchase, which was a command line wallet in a physical shop with which took like 10 minutes to generate the proof, and with
the laptop, right? Not on the phone.
Yes, I've been there since the beginning and used unshielded Zcash, and then when shielding came to mobile, I really got more interested. I started kind of being paid in Zcash for some things right when the dusting attack started, and so I've used a lot of different wallets. I've had some frustrations, not specific to just the attack, but specific to that there was no just use this wallet I could recommend for myself or other people. I was using Wallet Lite. That was sort of discontinued. I'm actually one of the foremost experts right now on how to get your money unstuck out of Wallet Lite into a different one. So hit me up if anyone needs help.
Wow.
And is it Zingo? What about Y Wallet? What about there's so many wallets? Nighthawk. Let's all use Nighthawk. And then Nighthawk is, from my understanding, no longer funded. And there's just this whole,
Yeah.
how do you maintain a Zcash user? And so my primary experience with that kind of a thing is through the Dash wallet that the core team that develops the Dash core protocol also has forever maintained a Dash wallet. And I think
Hmm.
it's one of the very best in the ecosystem. I've used a lot of third-party ones over the years. Again, my 11 coming up on 12 years in crypto, right? The long years in the space. Uh, and so because of that experience, I kind of might have seen a little bit more of the logic behind having like a minimum viable product for Zcash users, and then the ecosystem can expand around that. So that's a very long-winded kind of talking about myself a little bit too much, but like,
No, I appreciate that support, and that is interesting. I
yeah,
completely agree. I'm sitting in my position, wanting to be able to evangelize Zcash. I love all the wallets that are out there operating and that are really doing quite well, but it's just a little bit confusing, as you know. If you're bringing somebody on board, it's nice to be able to say, here, this is the one that's going to get you that core functionality. It's going to be very clean. It's not going to do a lot of other things that will confuse a lot of people who are you're just onboarding. So I think that is really, really important. I think this is going to be a game changer. And by the way, there's a ton of things that are happening in the Zcash ecosystem that are also game changers and they're really high priority. And it's been tough, I think, for Electric Coin Company and others who are leading, like the foundation and for ECC to set these roadmaps and set the priorities because there's just so many important things. But I'm really in favor of this path, and I think it's the right call is to make sure that we have this core functionality like nailed so we can really bring on users into the ecosystem.
yeah, definitely. It's interesting time for growth, and I think that on the whole, with the crypto ecosystem, we've had a crazy explosion of technological innovation over the last 15 years, and we've seen largely the end user is an ETF purchaser. If I'm going to be a little disrespectful
Yeah.
and kind of
Oh,
categorizing it,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
these days it seems like this cycle we're in, I guess, one of two bull years, and then 4 years from now the next cycle. I personally think, based on just gut instincts maybe, that this is when we start to actually have massive amounts of users of of the actual blockchains themselves, of the actual cryptocurrencies. It starts now. Finally, been building for 15 years. Now it's time to onboard, and so that kind of aligns, I guess, with the message. So I'm a big fan of Zuko. I've known him for many years. He's a great dude.
Hmm.
Clearly a visionary, clearly a genius. And Zcash is, ECC in particular, right? The Zcash project has broken the state of the art of technology and cryptography and things many times, and it's been fascinating to see. I did hear a lot of calls of it's time for a change though, and it's time to move into a different direction. And so now I had Josh on this podcast at the very beginning of the year talking about, his kind of new direction, things like that. And so from your perspective, uh, where can you see this new direction of Zcash moving under the, I guess, new ECC leadership, and I guess your role in particular? What are some big priorities or things that we're going to be focusing on in the future?
I can speak to my role for sure, and that is that I am focused on building alliances that are going to help us bring additional functionality to the Zashi wallet that would add, like we already mentioned, that with Brave, for example, we might have on and off capability there. So you can buy and sell Zcash right there in that digital wallet of Braves. Would like to have that functionality as well inside the Zashi wallet. Would like to be able to allow people to do swaps and to, uh, you know, if there's other features that get built onto Zcash in the future, like down the road, perhaps if there are ZSAs and there stable coins, who knows what we will be building, or the ecosystem basically, not just Electric Coin Company, the whole ecosystem is going to be building into Zcash, I think we would want to fully embrace those things and support them as much as we possibly can. So I will just be working on all the alliances to help that happen as fast as possible, because I think that we're I love the way you positioned the framing of this and saying that we're at the stage where I think people are going to actually start to use it after we've been working on this for over a decade. And um, I think that's right. I think this is a special opportunity, and whenever we have these cycles where we're at the kind of heading towards a bull cycle and people get all excited about crypto, they want to learn. It's really nice to be in a position in this cycle to say, look, we have this exciting functionality now that you'll be able to use. So I think we've got to just build it in as quickly as possible. And that's really what Electric Coin Company is solely focused on right now, is like getting this functionality into the wallet, getting the wallet released, and then adding on to it as soon as possible so that we can build things that people get really excited about.
Yeah, it's so we're thinking about, the constant question about like how do we get more people to use crypto and things like that. And I've been a heavy crypto user. I would say heavier than most since 2013, heavier than almost everyone since 2015. Um, but I am one of few. It's a growing number for sure of people that
Mm-hmm.
use crypto for their daily money, but it's a growing number, but it's still relatively few. And for some of what I consider to be the better projects in the space, and Zcash is one of them, it seems to be even kind of slimmer pickings as far as like regular users or frequent usage, as far as what we can see from like blockchain data, et cetera. So what do you think are some of those key missing components that you'd like to see filled? Like obviously when we're looking at partnerships, we're thinking strategically about what is missing is going to keep people, that if we had this, we'd get more people actually using the stuff. What are some of those key areas or functionalities that you see as more important?
Yeah, being able to just allow Zcash to move more fluidly through buying and selling it directly, but also being able to use it at a merchant, for example. And there are organizations that we would hopefully like to integrate with. Flexa is one where they have the ability to use your crypto in real time, doing these transactions at merchants, at some merchants. There's others that are in the space doing things like that as well. Where if we can integrate with partners like that and have the ability to just take your ZEC and use it on the spot at a merchant. It might need to go through some gift card process, perhaps, like that would go into a special card uh, for that merchant. That's a possibility that we would probably want to integrate with as well. So yeah, I think those are really the key things. Like right at this moment is just making sure that if you want to use it and you want to have the privacy that Zcash provides, that we just make that possible easily for you so that you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and it's not overly complicated. Now it's kind of complicated, unfortunately, for a lot of people.
Yeah. What are some of those specific things? So you mentioned, of course, spending tools like Flexa in the app, and I've used the Spedin app before to buy some things to Zcash in the past, and
Right.
when it works very smoothly, and it's not something that I can really use for a lot of things right now, but hopefully that's going to change in the future. And then of course maybe some gift card rails and things like that. I guess on ramps are another part of that solution, right? About
Mm-hmm.
um, on ramping people easily, like you can buy it easily there. What are some other things? So for maybe a broader question is regarding the asset itself, the ZEC asset itself. Um, One thing I've noticed is the volatility of cryptocurrencies tends to impede people from using too much of that as far as daily payments, like the fluctuations. But also when you go to, as I'm going to the good projects, right? Basically anything that's not Bitcoin has had interesting market dynamics that can't always be favorable for people wanting to own the asset and use it to exchange for goods and services. And I know like a lot of people are like complaining about, oh, Zcash the price, like all that kind of stuff. So do you think, how important do you think it is to have some sort of a like stablecoin type asset on Zcash, or possibly a Bitcoin pegged or Bitcoin representative unit of count? What are your just general thoughts about that as like a spending tool?
I love the idea of it. I think that we've got activity in the ecosystem that's been going on for a long time with Zcash shielded assets. Like that is something that um, I, I I think it's very close. We've actually got, that's one of the items that is listed on our roadmap, and I know the foundation is working on it, and I'm very eager to get that implemented too. So, I think that yeah, this is an important thing that will make a huge difference if we can make it part of the ecosystem. Having worked in policy and in Washington D.C. for the past couple of years, I have probably, well, certainly, a greater appreciation than most of how it's going to be difficult to do this in a way that is going to be compliant and is going to not raise some serious red flags with policymakers and others and regulatory agencies. So it's just not going to be straightforward, I'm afraid. And I think that there's been some discussion about this in the Zcash forum recently about some of the risks that are involved, and this is a very serious topic. It's something that we have to take very seriously as an ecosystem, and it's different, to be candid. Like when you start to have any stable coin on a platform, you're going to have AML KYC type functionality built in from those issuers. It's just most likely certainly going to be there in one way or another, and then having that on a chain of privacy raises questions in some regulators' minds and policymakers. So this is something that we have to work through. I'm very much in favor of it happening. I just know that we have to do it very carefully, and we have to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where uh, you know our developers are at risk of having legal issues, because that's happened, and we
Yeah.
and we don't want that to happen to our ecosystem.
Yeah, I had the unfortunate, I guess the pleasure of seeing one of the Tornado Cash developers after he was released from detention in Amsterdam last year, and it's kind of a chilling reminder that sometimes you could be in a completely legitimate form of business, but there's some risks because of just how new everything is. And the policy thing is something that I think I wish more crypto projects honestly had a greater visibility into just how hard it is to mesh what we're doing with what is with the powers that be in the world. Because if we are waiting for, there's a certain balance of, which I guess maybe could roll in the next question, right? What do you think is the balance between asking for permission and doing things and asking for forgiveness later, sort of a thing? Which is, it's probably the thorniest question I could ask, and I'm sorry for that. But like, as far as if the government and central bank run monetary systems and technology, et cetera, was sufficient, there would never have been a Bitcoin. There would never have been this entire space. This is an attempt to do something new and do better than what previous generations had. And so, where's that balance, do you think, about compliance and policy alignment with the powers that be versus try to build something that changes the world in a meaningful way, and then worry about later about how do we make sure that goes as smoothly as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm
Feel
working
free
in
to
this.
say no comment because there
No,
could be
I
landmines.
think this is why I'm here.
Hmm.
I'm working in cryptocurrency, and I'm working specifically on a project like Zcash so that we can fundamentally change the nature of money, and that that is what drives me every day. If I could just like switch flip a switch and change things fundamentally, there would be very little connection between money and state. I think that that is a serious problem in the way that economies operate, and it's an impediment in many different ways that are seriously problematic. Um, so that is a very long term vision, I believe. I think that that vision is going to happen. It's going to come to fruition eventually, but it's very long term, to be candid. And as far as like how we do these things on a day to day basis, and working through it tactically, I think you have to be very much in tune with policymakers and regulators, and you this is not an area where you, as they say sometimes in Silicon Valley, where you what is it? I forget. It's like basically break things along the way.
Yeah. Move
But
fast and break things.
move fast and break things. Yeah, no, I'm not in favor of taking that approach. I think that the reason why Electric Coin Company and Zcash is well respected in the cryptocurrency policy world is because we've been very responsible. We've been engaging in policy. I'm here in Washington, D.C., working in the policy ecosystem every day, working closely with trade associations. I host a monthly meeting that has become quite popular in DC for bringing policymakers together. We're front and center as far as like being engaged and being a productive member of the debate and discussion. Now, we have very, very clear opinions about changing things,
Of
and
course.
we're going to be working on that for for the foreseeable future, and continuing to push on that hard, very hard. But we're going to ensure that we're not doing things that are going to put the project at risk, or to and especially put our developers at risk, and we have to be very careful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, something that I've struggled with sometimes, I guess, is the how much I value the things that we're all working on versus how much the market values it currently. And it seems like, yeah, obviously, as far as the crypto markets are concerned, it seems to be a lot of like, either stable store of value or casino like meme coin speculation. But also, as far as like the end user is concerned, do you really see a big market demand for privacy, especially financial privacy today? Obviously, from a distance, obviously, like at the fundamentals, it's a very key foundational pillar of free society, et cetera. There's a lot of great things about it. But with like the average person, do you think that they really will go through the extra trouble to use something like Shielded Zec as opposed to Venmo with auto posting of their purchases to their social media feeds, which Venmo used to have at least at one point? Do you think is it a hard sell to try to get people to really care about privacy these days?
I think it's a hard sell if there's not a reasonable level of usability. If there is basic usability that is, even though it may take a little extra step, I think that can work. I think that we can actually make progress in that regard. Now, is it going to be a Venmo killer? Maybe not. Probably not. PayPal killer? Probably not. But is it going to be a viable product that a lot of people value and use, and make a part of the way they operate? I think it very well can be and will be. I think we just haven't nailed that fundamental usability yet, and
Hmm.
that's what we're working on now. So the fact that that is our top priority, to me, gives me a lot of hope for what's coming just around the corner. I mean, very, very soon around the corner, where we're going to have a wallet where I can like go in front of a large group of people and say, hey, download this wallet from the App Store. It's super easy to onboard. You can get some ZEC as soon as you install it. You can buy ZEC, or you can, if you have Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, you can swap in and out to ZEC and experience it in a very clean user interface and something that's very simple. To me, that's what's really that's what's holding us back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the fact that people don't value privacy. I actually think that in social media, it's a slightly different dynamic than it is in finance. And I think in
Mm-hmm.
finance, people do understand that they need privacy. And if you just bring it to their attention that, like in some cryptocurrencies, you don't have any privacy at all, and in traditional finance, in many ways, you don't really have much privacy. You have some, but not a lot of privacy if you really think about it. So, if we have the usability and then we go out there with that message, I think we've got something, and then it's going to be very viable and used.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting to see that dynamic where um, you have something that apparently like a lot of people might not seem to care about, but then again, I know my good friend Naomi Brockwell's made a whole career out of just educating people about privacy and how to improve their personal like device privacy and things like that. And especially has been very popular on, ironically, on TikTok of all places, where a lot of people really have this hunger for that short form fun content that just teaches you, oh, your computer's spying on you this way, that way, etc.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's kind of
No, she's
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah, and there's also uh, I notice quite a lot of people using the Signal Messenger these days, where
Hmm.
the only real appeal of it for most people over like texting is the privacy aspect. And
Yeah.
I do remember in was it 2018, 2019, conversing with a mainstream journalist and being surprised that they were on Signal as well. But of course, it starts
Yep.
there, and then average people kind of start using it. And so apparently, yeah, must be ease of use really kind of makes people not have to mess around with that anymore. I've also seen almost every single podcast out there has had some manner of a VPN sponsorship at some point, to
Oh
where
yeah.
basically it's like a basic, and some of that, and I guess that kind of rolls into maybe a next sub question type thing, because I noticed a lot of it is just, hey, protect your privacy online, but a lot of it is more geared towards the functionality that gives you as a result, which is watch content that's not available in your country or access things that are geo-blocked, kind of jump that,
Mm.
get that extra thing. And so, do you have, this maybe you should have time to prepare to really think about it, but what are some of those kinds of things that we can expect as a result from better privacy that we can hone in on? It's not just this ephemeral like, oh, you're more private, but like if you use privacy, then maybe you don't have impacts to your credit score when you buy this kind of thing, or maybe you don't something else, or maybe you don't suffer job opportunities because someone pulls some data, some market data of you purchasing or donating to a political candidate that is not favorable at this workplace. Or do you have any and it's more than okay to say, no, I don't know yet, but any idea of some of those practical selling points of privacy? If you transact with privacy, you can get these tangible benefits in the short term. Do you have any ideas about those?
For me personally, it,
Mm-hmm.
it's I don't know that it's about tangible short-term benefits. It's more
Mm-hmm.
about just being able to have some degree of assurance that the things I buy and sell are just, part of my private life, and um, that that is just not the case really anymore in the way most people are doing business, and that's kind of remarkable. In that, like, you go back to like the early days of my lifetime, people conducted most transactions in cash, and that there wasn't this like massive surveillance state around the financial world. So, to me, it just seems like what we're not trying to sell um, these short-term benefits necessarily, but we're just trying to make a system work the way it always kind of had worked, and that was very protective of users and consumers in the system. Like, although, what I can say, and what I think is that, like, we're just beginning to see the way that artificial intelligence is going to affect our daily lives in some really positive ways. But wow, when you think about it with regard to privacy and the way that people's information will be analyzed and used in ways that it really hasn't been before, just by everyone. Like, it's going to be available to everyone. It's very clear. That kind of terrifies me, and I don't know all of the negative effects that is going to have, but I think that from the commerce and financial perspective, it's going to be very significant. So um, that makes me think that, if I were a person that were like looking at AI and saying, oh, wow, this is potentially wonderful, but also kind of scary. On the scary side, it should make them think that I should try to use something that gives me a little bit of privacy in my finances, because unless you just want, your checkbook open to the world and all of your finances open to the world, you better start thinking about it now, because it's going to be too late.
Yeah, especially there's some interesting developments in the retail world. Like, for example, Wendy's has started to experiment with surge pricing, where they change their menu item prices based on demand portions of the day. So your
Yeah.
$4 hamburger could be $5. And it could be interesting to see data sharing agreements between corporate giants with your income levels, where they get to see all your purchases, everything. They form a data map of you, and then they can upcharge you because they know that you can pay that or you will pay that. Whereas if you transact privately, you don't necessarily have that. You just have to, it's just whatever the agreed upon price. You don't come to the trading negotiating table at a disadvantage. So, I mean, this is something that there's endless reasons for this. I
There
kind of
really are.
I understood just the root benefits of full-on financial and personal sovereignty for decades and decades. And so for me, this is something that's ingrained in myself, but it will be a kind of an educational battle maybe to get people to fully grasp why this is not just good to have, but like a priority in their lives. And also to what you were saying, I do think that the usability really helps make that, it lowers the cost of engaging in private behavior, in private financial decisions. So beyond that, what are some of the bigger challenges you foresee in the future that we'll have to overcome on this glorious road to digital privacy, Valhalla, as it were?
But the challenges that I'm most focused on are in the policy and regulatory arena. There are some proposals that are outstanding right now that are very, very concerning. And they're concerning to us at Electric Coin Company as we're developing a digital wallet, because some of them are suggesting that anyone who provides even a non-custodial digital wallet that doesn't have, other than like integrating with third parties who do like on and off ramp or swapping, etc., we wouldn't be doing any of that directly. We would still be required to do KYC and AML checks, and that to me is pretty remarkable that those proposals are outstanding. In fact, proposed to go into effect next year. This is a Treasury uh, proposed rulemaking that's outstanding. That kind of thing really terrifies me. And in addition to that, you can look at some other things, other proposals that are outstanding. I think one of them is also from Treasury about the possibility of requiring AML checks for any cloud infrastructure services. So it's much
Oh,
bigger than just cryptocurrency, but this is moving into like general computing. And almost all of our computing is in the cloud these days. Any entrepreneur or software developer who wants to publish software now would have AML KYC reporting, or the services would have reporting requirements on those individuals. It's yeah, it's pretty remarkable that like essentially this financial surveillance is creeping its way like throughout every bit of the infrastructure of the world, and beyond what we would consider traditional financial activities and intermediaries who have, of course, reporting requirements already. So these things really concern me, and it makes me wonder how long we're going to be able to continue operating the way we do and developing a digital wallet if some of these things come to fruition. And that's just a huge deal. I have hope that we'll be able to stop these things. I'm working closely with trade associations and many other colleagues here in Washington, D.C. to push back on these things. But at the end of the day, we're publishing open source software, and it's going to be there for people to use, and I guess that's the ultimate fallback.
yeah. I guess the final question, sort of piggybacking on that, maybe grim picture of where this stands in, as far as a U.S. based company having to deal with those old legacy threats to a fully new open source free ecosystem and world. Um, are there any thoughts, and this is maybe not ECC specific, but just as Zcash as a community, what are the thoughts of kind of reducing exposure to the U.S. Uh, system? As in, maybe are there any fallbacks for maybe ideas for a different entity to be set up outside of the U.S. that could potentially hire developers? And if ECC's mission becomes limited or just completely untenable, that something like that could potentially continue, or just that, what are the kind of globalized decentralization efforts or thoughts of considering about Zcash because of these kinds of regulatory threats, I guess?
Yeah, and I don't know that I have anything to say specifically about ECC in that regard, um, but I know that like it has been a concern for the Zcash ecosystem. I think at the last ZCon, the annual conference, the Zcash Foundation, announced that they had established a legal position in another country, and people can look up the details of that. But so yeah, I think it's kind of good to have plans in case that would be required. There are other projects here that are actually, all their developers are like, maybe not all, but like at least their core leadership is based in the U.S., but they don't provide any of their crypto services in the U.S. The one that comes to mind that I kind of really love the project is DYDX. They're here in the U.S., but they don't provide any access to trading on their decentralized exchange to U.S. customers. I don't think that really works for us. We need to be able to provide our wallet to everyone. So yeah, I don't have a great answer to that.
Mhm.
Just to be honest, it's not a scenario that I want to see happen.
Yeah. So I guess maybe there's a possibility in this, not a good scenario, right? This is one we're trying to avoid, but if it is unavoidable, maybe there could be a world where Zashi gets kind of spun off to some other project, can pick it up instead, and ECC focuses purely on the protocol because of the U.S. jurisdiction. Do you think that's something that would, maybe be a last resort possibility?
I'm not even sure. in these scenarios, I'm not sure we could even do the protocol in the U.S. To be candid. So some of these scenarios are pretty bad, and I think that to the extent that like if these restrictions, some of these restrictions go into effect, I think that like any level of support that we would be doing in the U.S. for the Zcash ecosystem could be restricted through legal means. So yeah, I mean, it very well could mean that things would have to fundamentally change, and that couldn't be done in the U.S. I just don't want that to happen, and I'm going to be pushing as hard as I can to make sure it doesn't.
Well, absolutely. It's something that I as well, as a someone who lives in a part of the U.S., it's not something I'd like to have happen either. But well, this has been quite the enlightening chat on the whole. Where could people find more about you and follow your work, etc.?
I try to post often on Twitter, just at Paul Brigner. I do the PGP for crypto. That's pretty good privacy for crypto monthly meetings. Did a podcast through last year, and I'll probably pick up a few episodes this year. I'm kind of busy these days, so I haven't been able to do that as much as I once did.
Mm-hmm.
I try to hold special briefings. I've had one in particular for the past couple of years that I think would be of interest to this community, your listeners, is a Global Encryption Day event. And it's in conjunction with the Global Encryption Day, community at large, I guess. It's I think who is it? Center for Democracy and Technology and Internet Society and others are kind of like the core drivers of it. But I've felt that this really aligns well with what we're doing at Electric Coin Company and in the Zcash world. So I do a big event every year for that. Find me on LinkedIn. Of course, Signal is where I do most of my communication. So, and I love the feature that they've added to Signal now, or I guess it's maybe still in beta, but they're adding so you can just use a handle instead of a telephone
Mm-hmm.
number, so you don't have a little bit extra privacy. You don't have to share your number and have that hanging out there. So my Signal name is paulbrickner.11. So you can try to hit me up that way.
Someone got the regular one before you did, huh?
No. If you go through the process to get it, they automatically add a number to the end. So it's part of the way that they format their names. So, I wanted to get paulbrickner.01, and I just I spent like a day trying to get 01 because it's a random assigned number. And I said, screw it. 11's fine because I finally got 11. So I just went with that.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, well, thanks for chatting with me today. This has been really great, and I hope you have a good one.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for your support of the Zcash ecosystem. It's great to have OGs like you doing this podcast and keeping people educated on these important issues. So thanks for your work.
Absolutely. Thank you.